Brothers and sisters, hello, welcome. My name is Brother Ignatius Pio, coming to you here from St. Leopold Friary in Yonkers, continuing our parish mission of Pray, Hope, and Don't Worry, the pandemic parish mission. Very welcome, and it's a joy to be here and pray with you tonight, and as it has been all through this week. God bless you, and please enjoy what we have to offer tonight. God bless you.
Because by your holy cross you have redeemed the world. Governing all things, with clemency you are with me. You draw near to me, Prince of Peace and mighty God, King of kings and Lord of all, you are with me. You draw near to me. Governing all things, with clemency you are with me. You draw near to me, Prince of Peace and mighty God, King of kings and Lord of all, you are with me. You draw near to me. Holy Father, you are holy. Jesus, you are Savior. Spirit, my recreator, you are holy. Father, you are holy. Jesus, you are Savior. Spirit, my recreator, you God of wonder and maker of all things, Lord of majesty, you are with me. You draw near to me. Holy God, holy mighty one, holy immortal one, you are with me. You draw near to me. God of wonder and maker of all things, Lord of majesty, you are with me. You draw near to me. Holy God, holy mighty one, holy God, holy mighty one, holy immortal one, you are with me. You draw near to me. God of wonder and maker of all things, Lord of majesty, you are with me. You draw near to me. Holy God, holy mighty one, holy immortal one, you are with me. You draw near to me. Oh, Father, you are holy. Jesus, you are Savior. Spirit, my Creator, you are holy. Father, you are holy. Jesus, you are Savior. Spirit, my Creator, you are holy. Father, you are holy. Jesus, you are Savior. Spirit, my Creator, you are holy. Father, you are holy. Jesus, you are Savior. Spirit, my Creator, you are holy. You are holy God. 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 You come to abide with me. Yes, you are holy God. And you abide with me. You are holy God. And you remain with me. You are holy God. And you remain with me. You are holy God. And you remain with me.
Good evening, brothers and sisters. Again, my name is Brother Ignatius Pio. It's a joy to be with you here tonight as we continue our pandemic parish mission, Pray, Hope, and Don't Worry. And I've been able to partake and participate with you and share my heart through music thus far, and it's a blessing today, particularly in a special way. be able to share with you my heart in words. I'd like to begin with a brief reading from the Holy Gospel according to St. John, chapter 9. As Jesus passed by, he saw a man blind from his birth. And his disciples asked him, "Rabbi, who sinned, this man or his parents, that he was born blind?" Jesus answered, "It was not that this man sinned or his parents, but that the works of God might be made manifest in him." The Gospel of the Lord. Praise to you, Lord Jesus Christ. I'd like to share a story with you. It's a true story about a dear friend of mine. His name is David. I met David in 2006 when I went in my first year of college to Ave Maria University in Florida. David was in his junior year then, and we were both in the discernment program for young men discerning religious life or priesthood. And as soon as I met David, I immediately realized there was something special about him. He was just very friendly, welcoming, honest, sincere, intelligent, a man also studying philosophy as I was, a man with a real heart for the truth, for reality, but with a complete openness and gentleness to others. And even though I was a lowly freshman, he welcomed me into his company, and we quickly became friends. I think the first things we did together were watching the trilogy of the Lord of the Rings, and then just through many conversations and activities and things throughout the year. I believe about towards the end of the first semester, he discerned that he was no longer called to the priesthood, but to marriage. And so he left the program that I was in, but I still saw him a lot. And one day he told me something which totally kind of surprised me. I didn't know was true. But he said that all of his life had had a very serious lung condition. Genetic lung condition. He was born with bad lungs. I believe one time he described it to me as leprosy of the lungs. You can imagine what that might be like, or maybe not if you don't want to imagine it. And I was surprised because you never would have known. He didn't have any ounce of self-pity in him, and he lived a very normal, happy college life and seemed a very healthy young man. But thankfully, at that time, and for a few years following, his health was very good. And he began dating another student there at Ave, another friend of ours, and they were married a few years later. I was privileged to be at their wedding and to serve the Mass. And they, over the years, had 4 children. He finished studies and then went on for his master's at Ave, and so he was there the whole time that I was there. We became good friends with their family. And but when we both graduated, we kind of parted ways a little bit as I came to join the Friars. And he continued his doctoral studies at the John Paul II Institute in DC. During those ensuing years, his health began to deteriorate significantly. And I would get updates now and again, and it was always hard to hear, and it was always difficult to understand why God would allow this to happen to such a useful and beautiful and wonderful man. Useful, I say, because he was a fantastic teacher with a real heart for evangelization, who in my mind, humanly, could have done a lot of good for the church if he wasn't hampered by his disease. So fast forward a few years, I left New York for a while, and then I came back to begin seminary in 2017. And in the fall of that year, David's health was continuing to decline. Found out that his wife had stage 4 Hodgkin's lymphoma. And we all meaning his friends, kind of threw up our hands and looked to the Lord and said, what? Why? What are you doing? What is this about? Kind of like we're all now asking the Lord, why, Lord, what is this about? It doesn't make sense to me. And the situation was obviously very moving, very difficult, very sad, and so I asked for and received special permission to go and visit his family for a week once my winter break came. And it happened providentially to coincide with the beginning of chemotherapy for his wife and the weaning of their 6-month-old child and all the tumult that ensued. And I went there expecting to enter a relative disaster zone, expecting to walk into darkness and difficulty. I went there expecting to see a dying man who was at his wit's end. And I saw a man who was fully alive. A man for whom the darkness could not overcome. Because the light of faith, the light of divine love poured forth through him. I saw a man who still, despite all of his woes and sufferings, did not have an ounce of self-pity, but who thought only of his wife and his children. I saw a man who could not walk down the hall without losing his breath, make breakfast, lunch, and dinner, and clean up and break up fights and counsel and console and change diapers. Saw a man who had to take multiple inhalers and nebulizer treatments and wear all sorts of interesting mechanisms and medical devices, and was constantly on oxygen. Radiate the breath of life. Smile, rejoice. Take joy in the delights and the little things of his children and in the small pleasures of life in conversation. I saw a man who was not supposed to go outside in the dry, frigid weather, day after day take his little portable oxygen and his bag filled with all of his medications and take his wife to her chemo appointments and to her doctor appointments, risking his own life so that he could sit there and be with her, so that she wouldn't be alone. I saw the works of God. I saw the glory of God. I saw the glory of a man fully alive, even though his body was giving way. I saw light in the darkness and hope in the midst of despair. And what was his secret, you might ask? How did this happen? Well, I suppose only he and God really know, but I got a clue one day when I was humming under my breath, or maybe not so under my breath, the song "Great Are You, Lord" by All Sons and Daughters, the refrain of which says to the Lord, "It's your breath in our lungs, and so we pour out our praise." David heard me singing that, and he said, "Oh, it's a good song." I said, "Oh yeah, it's a good song. I just heard it, I just really like it, it's beautiful." And I was like, "That's my song. It's what I say to the Lord every day. It's your breath in my lungs." With every breath in, I give thanks for that breath, and with every breath out, I ask for the next one. Suffering, his weakness of lung had brought him to such a profound grasp of the reality that we all live, which is utter dependence on the Lord at every moment. Every single breath, brothers and sisters, to you and to me is a gift, even if we think we can do it on our own. Every moment of existence is a complete gift from the Lord. And we would do well to give thanks for every breath that we take, and as we exhale, to ask the Lord for the next one. When I prayed about my encounter, my time with David, the word of the Lord came to me from St. Paul, "My power is made perfect in weakness." And I think that is also the lesson for us, that in our weakness, in our suffering, in our breakdown, the power of the Lord is shown. Thanks be to God, the chemotherapy seemed to be very effective, and quickly his wife was feeling much better and had renewed energy and strength. And over the summer, they had a little bit of a reprieve. But when the next fall came around, David again began to get sick. A simple cold was a threat to him. I've been thinking about him a lot during this time of the virus because it would have been a major, certain death sentence to him. And he was struggling along, but on top of that, they found out that although they had thought his wife was in remission, she actually still had the cancer, which meant that it was more serious than they had first ever thought, and that she would need a bone marrow transplant. And when he sent out an update to the many people who have been praying for him and rallying around them, instead of complaining or asking why God, this is what he said. "These struggles have given us a very acute reminder that although this earth has many wonderful things, this life is a preparation for eternity. As good as things can get here, it always remains messy, and we continually have a longing for something stable, which will never exist here. That's the challenge of being a Christian. We always have one foot on earth and one foot in heaven. We can never get too settled here, although it's often tempting." Suffering is a journey to the heart of life. It makes us realize the essential truth of what this life is about. It takes all that is superficial, all that is fake, all that is passing, and relativizes it to what's true, to what's real, to what persists. Our souls and our love for the Lord and for others. As I read those words in that email, I was sitting, I remember still, in the seminary library, listening to praise and worship songs, and the song that happened to come on at that time, as I was reading those words, was the song that I played last night, if you tuned in, "The King of My Heart." The refrain of which is, "You are good, good, oh, you're never gonna let me down." As I heard those words, in the seeming contrast, as those words are sung to the Lord, "You're good, you're never gonna let me down," and here my good friend seemed to be being let down, I was overwhelmed by the power and the presence of God. And I realized that in that moment, even though it didn't make any sense, God was good. And even though he seemed to be failing and to be letting us down, he was right there. The presence of God was in the midst of the storm. The presence of God was the light in the darkness. I was so moved by that I forwarded the link to the video that I was listening to David. And he responded, and this is what he said. "Sometimes I think that God allows us to feel desperate because he wants to fill the void of our needs. He thirsts so much for us that he allows us to experience this thirst for him. When we ask him to fill our void, he fills it. He gives us the grace and the gifts he has been longing to send us. that sometimes we are so superficially satisfied with what's in front of us that we kind of just stay where we're at. But then he strips away everything so that we have no choice but to trust in him. Then he can fill and lead us. Sometimes we are so superficially satisfied with what's in front of us that we kind of just stay where we're at. But when he strips away everything so that we have no choice but to trust in him, then he can fill us and lead us. How can he say that? This is a man who's staring death in the face. A man who has no human hope. A man for whom science and medicine can do nothing. And not only for himself, but his wife is also staring death in the face. And amidst all the anxieties and the concerns and the worries about their family and their children and their own lives, how can he say this? How can he see? It's the gift of faith. Faith can see. And faith can see that suffering is a mercy. That suffering brings us to the heart of life. That suffering impels us beyond barriers. That suffering removes obstacles. That suffering strips away everything so that the essential can remain. It doesn't make sense, but it's true. Suffering is a mercy. John Paul II called this the gospel of suffering. That Christ didn't come to eradicate our suffering, but to give it meaning and redemption and power. Because in weakness, God's power is made manifest. In the weakness of the cross, his power is made manifest. In the weakness of the Eucharist, his power is made manifest. God continually makes himself weak so that his power would shine forth. And we get to participate in that in some mysterious way. A few months passed, and I had the opportunity during spring break to go visit David and his family again after over a year. And I was getting ready, in the first half of the break I went on retreat, and before I went on retreat, David sent me an email that said, looking forward to seeing you. I'm doing very badly, much worse than even the last time you saw me, which for me was hard to imagine. And so I knew in my heart that this would probably be the last time that I would see him. And sure enough, the night before I was to leave from my retreat to go down to see him, I got a phone call that he had been hospitalized since the previous week. They brought him in because he had this cold had progressed and he couldn't breathe. And they put him on a ventilator, and the ventilator wasn't even enough. And so they did an even more extreme type of life support to keep him alive, in some final hope that perhaps there could be a lung transplant or something. But I was told that day that he wasn't expected to live through the week. So the next day I drove down and went to visit his family and went to see him at the hospital. And again, I expected to walk into utter chaos and darkness and despair. When I walked into his room in the ICU, and I saw a man there again, dying, thin, with tubes coming out of every which way, keeping him alive, breathing for him, pumping his blood for him. I saw the same man fully alive. He was unconscious, he couldn't speak, but his presence radiated and proclaimed the gospel of suffering. It proclaimed the works of the Lord. It proclaimed the love and constant self-emptying that characterized his life. light pervaded the room. And so I didn't weep for him. I wept for myself, and I begged him to pray for me and to pray for his family. And especially in this time, I continue to beg him to pray for an end to this virus and all those who are suffering. The next day, Thursday, March 28th, 2019, 1 year ago today, at 2:58 p.m., right before coming up on the hour of mercy, as his wife sang in his room the Divine Mercy Chaplet, David passed on to eternal life. He had been working on his dissertation for a number of years, been held back because of his illness. The topic of his dissertation was the theology of mercy and the thought of John Paul II. A week later, at his funeral, the first words out of the homilist's mouth were these words from the Gospel of St. John. "Rabbi, who sinned, this man or his parents, that he was born blind?" Jesus answered, "It was not that this man sinned or his parents, but that the works of God might be made manifest in him." And then he said, "Who sinned, David or his parents, that he was born with bad lungs? It was not for his sins or the sins of his parents, but that the works of God might be made manifest in him." Brothers and sisters, who sinned? Who sinned that the COVID-19 virus has come upon us? Us, our parents, somebody else? It's not that they sinned or that we sinned, although we have and we deserve chastisement. But that's not why the virus has come upon us. It's that the works of God, the glory of God, the love of God, the mercy of God, the power of God might be made manifest in our weakness. On David's funeral card, these words from Psalm 31 were on the back, in Latin and in English. "In te speravi, Domine, dixi tu es Deus meus, in manibus tuis tempora mea." I have put my trust in you, O Lord. I said, "You are my God. My destiny is in your hands." It's our breath, it's your breath in our lungs. So we pour out our praise because you are good and you will never let us down. We trust in you, we surrender to you, that your glory and your power might be made manifest in our weakness. Brothers and sisters, if we can pray these words, if we can make this our prayer, "I trust in you, O Lord. I surrender to you, I trust in you," then the closing words of that psalm, Psalm 31, will apply to us as well. "Be strong. Let your heart take courage, all you who hope in the Lord." And so I say to you, be strong and take courage, and his light will shine in your darkness.
mercy in this stillness. There is a mercy, that's you. There is a power in this weakness. There is a power, that's you. There is a beauty in the broken. There is a beauty, that's you. There is a rising in this dying. Oh, there is a rising, that's you. You call my name, speaking love into my life. In your body and your blood, I find your love. And you call my name, speaking love into my life. In your body and your blood, I find your love. And you say, and you say, you say, be consumed by my love for you. 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 Your power, oh God, your power made perfect weakness. Your power, oh God, your power, oh God, your power, oh God made perfect weakness. Your power, oh God, your power, oh God. Your power, oh God, made perfect in weakness. Your power, oh God. Your power, oh God. power in this weakness. There is a power that's here. There is a searching in this darkness. There is a clinging to you. Your power is made perfect, oh God. Your power is made perfect, oh God. Your power is made perfect, oh God, in my weakness. In my weakness. Come rest in my love for you. Child, come rest in my love for you. Child, come rest in my love for you. Child, come rest in my love for you.
So the Lord
to guide you, to watch to God to guide you, to watch to God to guide you. They watch, they guard, they guide you. Pray, hope, pray, hope, pray, hope, don't worry. 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 Abide in me, abide in me. Come find your breath, your life in me. Come find your breath, your life in me. Come rest within my heart and see. I'll be your strength through everything. Come find your hope, your life in me. Come, child, abide in me. Abide in me, abide in me. Come find your breath, your life in me. Come find your breath, your life in me. Come rest within my heart and see. I'll be your strength through everything. Find your hope, your life in me. Come, child, abide in me. Pray hope, pray hope, pray hope, don't worry. 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 Pray hope, pray hope, pray hope, don't worry. Heaven sing. Pray hope, don't worry. Angels sing. Pray hope, don't worry. Pray hope, don't worry. Pray hope, don't worry. No. Pray hope, don't worry. Pray hope, pray